Hello and welcome to another episode of World Connect. It's where we bring you news and analysis from across the world. Now, this week saw strained Iran-Saudi Arabia ties, North Korea claiming to test the hydrogen bomb, and the US president announcing new rules for gun possession. But there are a number of other events that took place globally which will not only affect the current situation but also have a long-term impact. I'm Shreya, and let's begin with the focus of today's edition. Iran-Saudi Arabia rift deepens after the kingdom executes 47 people, including Shia leader Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr. Syria and Yemen to feel the impact even as a divided West Asia comes to terms with the conflict. North Korea claims to have tested hydrogen bombs successfully. Experts say it's too early to rely on the claim. Pressure on Pyongyang-Beijing ties rises as China has long opposed its neighbor's nuclear development. A tearful Barack Obama announces stricter regulations on gun possession. But how far would these new rules help in refraining Americans? 73rd Golden Globes to kick off this year's awards season. Cate Blanchett's starrer Carol dominates with 5 nominations, including for Best Drama and Best Actress. And the story of Chinese man Peng Shuilin, who didn't let even the hardest of times defeat him. Let's begin with our top focus as news of the execution of 47 people by Saudi Arabia, including Shia leader Nimr al-Nimr, took center stage this week. What was brought into limelight was the tussle between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, even as the world urged the two countries to reach a resolution through talks, it was not long before Saudi Arabia cut all political ties with Iran. But this dispute is not new and finds its origin back in the 1970s.
Diplomatic ties broken, a heated exchange in a divided Middle East. Saudi Arabia's execution of Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr and Iran's subsequent reaction to it has brought into limelight a deeply ingrained dispute between the two countries. The killing of one of the most influential leaders of the Shia community in Saudi Arabia was bound to create ripples in the region. Then why was it carried out? There is a pertinent religious reason to the current situation. The Shia-Sunni tussle in the region has been more than 1,000 years old. However, faith is just one of the several factors that contribute to the Saudi-Iran power struggle. Globally, observers attribute the latest executions to a well-carved-out political strategy by the ruling Al Saud family that fears losing its grip. Oil prices are sinking and threatening the country's economy. By gathering support from within its Sunni population and other Sunni-dominated nations, the regime will not only reinforce its position but also send out a clear message to rebels at home. The rift between Iran and Saudi Arabia goes back to the Iranian Revolution of 1979 that saw a toppled pro-Western leader and Shia authorities taking over. In 1987, clashes at the Hajj killed hundreds of Iranian pilgrims, and Saudi Arabia suspended diplomatic ties for 3 years. In 2003, when Saddam Hussein was defeated and a Shia-dominated government took over in Iraq, Saudi Arabia was accused of supporting Sunni militancy. The Arab Spring saw Iran supporting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the Saudis back in the opposition. The stampede and the battle for power, coupled with the fear for Iran's nuclear deal, posed a challenge to Saudi Arabia. Although Riyadh publicly accepted the nuclear deal, it was concerned about Iran's reintegration into the global economy. That would mean cheap oil from Iran, sending oil prices down further and making Tehran emerge as a legitimate regional power. The latest executions have led Syria and Yemen to bear the major brunt. A Saudi-led coalition battling Shia Houthi rebels in Yemen officially announced the end of a ceasefire that neither side has fully observed. Saudi Arabia accuses Iran of backing the Shia group and intervened to support Yemeni President Hadi. On the other hand, Iran wants Syrian President Assad to stay, while Saudi Arabia wants him to go. While world powers have called for de-escalation of tension, the US, a long-term ally of Saudi Arabia, is seeing a thaw in ties with Iran in the wake of the nuclear deal. With the Saudis looking determined to go ahead with their current strategy, it would be a long time before a turbulent West Asia becomes a stable and peaceful region.
As the war in Syria enters its fifth year, millions in the country are struggling to survive. The Syrian government has agreed to allow aid convoys into Madaya, northwest of Damascus, and Foa and Kefraya in Aleppo. Now, skeleton residents are braving landmines and snipers to get hold of food. A UN statement said that it had reports of people dying from starvation. Now, estimates suggest that up to 4.5 million people in Syria live in far-flung areas, and among those, nearly 4 lakh are in those locations which do not have access to the life-saving aid that they urgently need. This week saw North Korea claiming to have successfully tested a powerful hydrogen bomb, sending shockwaves across the world. Now, even as the UN Security Council held an emergency meet soon after, experts warned that it might just be too early to believe North Korea's claim. And here's why.
The first hydrogen bomb test was successfully conducted at 10 a.m. on January 6, 2016. We will not give up a nuclear program as long as the United States maintains its stance of aggression.
Successful test firing of a miniaturized hydrogen bomb. At least, that's what North Korea claims. An emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council was speedily convened, and the world, though skeptical, came together to denounce the communist regime's nuclear claim.
This test once again violates numerous Security Council resolutions. This act is profoundly destabilizing for regional security and seriously undermines international non-proliferation efforts. I condemn it unequivocally.
Though it will take long before a conclusion is reached on North Korea's claim of testing a hydrogen bomb, many believe it could just be rhetoric. What casts a shadow of doubt on North Korea's capability is the fact that the seismic waves generated by the recent test, the fourth for the country, was near about 5.1 magnitude earthquake. This is the same magnitude reported after North Korea's last confirmed nuclear test in February 2013. 2 other nuclear tests were carried out in 2009 and 2006. A hydrogen bomb, or a thermonuclear bomb, goes through a fusion reaction. That is, the merging of atoms as compared to fission, or the splitting of atoms, in the atomic bomb. And so, if miniaturized, it is 1,000 times more powerful, and the same seismic reading is near impossible. Another reason for doubt is the fact that many believe North Korea doesn't have the resources to put together a hydrogen bomb. North Korea is already under a wide array of international sanctions and is sealed by virtually no trade. But it hasn't stopped North Korea from pursuing its nuclear ambitions. The main reasons for sanctions not acting as a deterrent has been China's reluctance for fear of destabilizing the Kim government, triggering an exodus to China and creating a power void. However, with this test, Pyongyang-Beijing ties are likely to hit a new low, as China has long opposed its neighbor's nuclear development. Relations with South Korea are also likely to suffer, with recent attempts at normalizing relations coming under renewed pressure. South Korea has already unleashed a high-decibel propaganda barrage across the border with North Korea in retaliation for its nuclear test. And Japan too is likely to increase its guard, changing the geopolitical equation in Asia.
The stage is set for the presidential polls in Taiwan. The country's 3 presidential candidates ramped up efforts to gather support with mass walkabouts and political rallies. The leader of the Democratic Progressive Party has been topping opinion polls, and Tsai Ing-wen, chairwoman of the DPP, emerged as the most liked candidate. The margin of Tsai's expected victory is important in terms of how fiercely a democratic Taiwan gets on with communist-ruled China, which considers the island a breakaway province. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that authorities must contemplate deporting foreigners convicted of crimes following the Cologne sex attacks. Terming the attacks unacceptable and despicable, Merkel said that clear signals had to be sent to those who are not prepared to abide by the German law. Now, many women had reported being robbed, threatened or sexually molested at New Year celebrations outside the Cologne's cathedral. People gathered in the Republic Square in central Paris this week to mark the first anniversary of the Charlie Hebdo shootings. On January 7, 2015, Islamist militants opened fire during an editorial meet at the satirical weekly. Now, 12 people, including many of the magazine's top staff, editor-in-chief Stephen Charbonnier, were killed in the attack. Now, Republic Square has become the focus for national mourning with several days of vigils. The headquarters of the newspaper has since moved elsewhere. A few reminders remain of the shooting, aside from a small pile of flowers and a recently unveiled plaque commemorating the victims. Meanwhile, another controversy was triggered related to the magazine's anniversary edition cover. This week, an emotional US president announced stricter rules for gun possession. The problem seems bigger than just about law and order. Even though there have been a number of steps taken to discourage Americans from gun possession, how far would these new regulations work in a country that does not seem keen on compromising its right to own firearms?
Our unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara, and from high schoolers at Columbine, and from first graders in Newtown.
Wiping tears while recalling the 2012 Sandy Hook Primary School shooting in Newtown, in which 20 children and 6 adults were killed, an emotional US president made the case for stricter regulations on gun control. The issue is much bigger than mere a law and order problem. America's culture and laws continue to drive the routine gun violence that marks American life. The roots of gun culture date back in American history when guns were a necessity for survival, like hunting for food or protection from predators or enemies. The practice of keeping guns traveled through generations, and now people link it to their idea of liberty and freedom. The proponents of gun rights claim that there can't be any change or amendment as they are guaranteed by the Constitution. But the claims are being countered by statistics that show a surge in deaths because of gun violence. According to a study, about 30,000 people are killed each year due to gun violence. In year 2015 alone, over 350 cases of mass shootings were reported, of which 62 were at schools. Despite repeated calls and attempts, President Obama has not been able to pass stricter law on gun control, facing obstructions in the US Congress. The very powerful lobby of gun owners and the influential National Rifle Association have also been obstructing any such moves. The measures include background checks for all gun sellers and overturning current exemptions, states providing information on disqualified persons, increased workforce for the FBI to process background checks, Congress being asked to invest $500 million to improve access to mental health care, exploring smart gun technology to improve gun safety. But the measures may be subjected to judicial scrutiny, as opponents have vowed to challenge it in courts, while the Republicans say the steps will be turned down if they come to power. The issue has become a major political tussle in the US presidential polls. US is a country which has the most gun violence cases, but the weakest regulations to avoid these. It now remains to be seen how long the new rules survive in a society which in no way is ready to compromise on its right to own firearms.
Haitian President Michel Martelly said that delayed presidential runoff election will take place on January 24th as the Caribbean country struggles to meet a February 7th constitutional deadline to inaugurate a new leader. A record 54 candidates contested the first round on October 25th, but an uproar over allegations of fraud prompted election authorities to postpone a runoff scheduled for December 27th. Meanwhile, a commission formed by the government to evaluate election results has said a second round of voting was possible. And as we head to the African continent, here are some images of a dog in Peru who is gaining popularity because of the way she walks. Born without her front legs, the dog hops around on her stumps like a kangaroo. Estrella, as she's fondly called, has now gained a celebrity status as a large number of visitors come to see her. In one of the deadliest attacks yet to hit strife-torn Libya, at least 50 people were killed by a truck bomb targeting a police training center in the city of Zliten. Now, according to witnesses, some 300 men, mainly Coast Guards, were inside the training compound at the time of the blast. Since a NATO-backed revolt ousted Gaddafi, Libya has slipped deeper into turmoil with two rival governments and a range of armed factions locked in a struggle for control of the OPEC state and its oil wealth. In Ethiopia, at least 140 people have been killed over the past 2 months in a crackdown on anti-government protesters. The protests began in November when students opposed government proposals to take over territory in several towns in the Oromia region around the country's capital, Addis Ababa. The data was recently released by Human Rights Watch. There was no immediate response from the Ethiopian government, which has previously put the death toll at 5. Now, the recent clashes is one of the biggest crises to hit Ethiopia since the 2005 election violence, in which nearly 200 people were killed. As more and more women are donning several professional and personal hats, several countries are encouraging men to actively participate in sharing responsibilities at home. Now, one such example has been set by Sweden, which has been urging new fathers to spend a full 3 months at home. And these super dads are more than happy to spend time with their toddlers.
Mothers spending time at home with newborn babies or young children, all their childhood is common while fathers are at work. The question is why, when parenting is a shared responsibility between the mother and the father? The concept of maternity leave for working women is not new, but the idea of paternity leave is yet to materialize in many countries. However, some countries have already taken a lead in this. In South Korea, which traditionally has a male-dominated society, the trend of fathers taking off from work and staying home for childcare is on a rise. Fathers like Chung, who are called super dads, are enjoying their new roles. For some, it's a way they can be different from their father's generation.
아침 밥 준비하고 설거지하고 전 다 모든 게 다 보람 있어요. 저녁 때
Everything is definitely worth it, from preparing breakfast to doing the dishes. When my kids want us to read a book at night, my wife must be feeling tired as she has to go to work the next day.
그때 책 읽어주고 이런 게 너무 보람돼요.
Sweden has set example in this regard for others to follow. The country has been encouraging fathers to take paternity leave since 1974. It has now come up with a new incentive for fathers to spend a full 3 months at home. Sweden was the first country in the world to replace maternity leave with parental leave, giving both partners the chance of time at home with their children. Groups of fathers having meals together with their toddlers around them, or men pushing prams through parks are not an uncommon sight. Now, steps have been taken in order to ensure that both parents spend full days with the child. Currently, Swedish couples get around 16 months paid parental leave when the child is born. Across the globe, national laws in at least 79 countries include paternity leave entitlements, nearly all of which are paid. The duration of the paid leaves differ greatly, ranging from 1 day of full pay in Tunisia to 90 days of 80% pay in Iceland, but all are far shorter than maternity leaves.
Now, before heading on to the world of entertainment and culture, here's a quick look at some more stories that made headlines across the globe. Body art has always fascinated humans. It was no different for these Algerian women who got themselves tattooed when they were as young as 10. But what was once considered a fashion statement was termed a sin years later. We bring you the story of Chaouia women and their fading tattoos.
The more the tattoos, the more beautiful they were considered. But for the Chaouia women in Algeria's Orhez mountains, what was once a sign of beauty has now become a source of pain. The fading inks behind the wrinkled faces was a tradition, a rule, and even a fashion statement in this part of the world. As young as 10, they got themselves tattooed to look more attractive than other girls their age. Though painful then, it made them feel beautiful. Other than enhancers of beauty when applied to the face, the tattoos, inked elsewhere on the body, were considered to have therapeutic and healing effects, particularly related to fertility. But over time, things have changed. What was once beautiful is today sin. The practice is frowned upon by the majority Muslim population, as they believe it is forbidden to alter one of Allah's creations. Some do not regret, while others feel they have sinned. To make amends, many have given away their silver jewelry after rubbing it on the tattoos. This gives them the feeling that they have erased them. The tattooing practice has ceased for more than half a century already. What remains today are fading tattoos that speak of a lifetime of experience, of beauty and of pain.
'73rd Annual Golden Globes. Yes, the Hollywood awards season is here, though the awards will not be airing until Sunday night, but the guessing has already begun and people have started picking their favorites.
The awards season kicks into high gear with the first major awards show of the year, the 73rd Annual Golden Globes. The red carpet has been rolled out in Beverly Hills ahead of the big award night on the 10th of January that will see the high and mighty of the industry battle it out for the best. Carol, the story of a married older woman who falls in love with a young shop girl in the 1950s, leads the Golden Globe nominations with 5 nods, including for Best Drama Film, and its 2 star actresses.
There's big popular films, I mean like The Martian and Mad Max in the race, but there's also little films like Carol and Room. So it's like, you know, the Golden Globes are encompassing a lot of what's going on in films, and it's a nice kind of cross-section of what's available.
The other films in the Best Drama category are Pioneer Era movie The Revenant, psychological thriller Room, Catholic Church abuse probe Spotlight, and action thriller Mad Max Fury Road. The Big Short, which takes a quirky look at the housing bubble crash that led to the 2008 recession, will contend for Best Comedy, a musical film. Other films in the category are, alongside space adventure The Martian, Melissa McCarthy caper Spy, coming-of-age comedy Trainwreck, and Joy, inspired by the story of the Miracle Mop creator.
And here's a story of overcoming extremes and rewriting destiny. A man in China who, despite losing half of his body, didn't give up and triumphed.
Chinese man Peng Shulin knows what struggle really means. For him, struggle is another name for life. Surviving against all odds and defeating everything that obstructed his spirit to go on is the story of Peng Shulin, a story that for many is no less than a miracle. On March 9, 2004, Shulin, who was working in Shenzhen, met with a major accident in which a heavy truck hit him badly, cutting him down in 2 parts. His lower part from his pelvis down was completely crushed. Fortunately, he survived the accident after an emergency operation by 20 doctors, but the loss was irreparable and the lower body, including his 2 legs, had to be amputated. This reduced his height from 162 centimeters to 78 centimeters. But Shulin never gave up. Bedridden for years, even doctors had little hope that he would ever be able to live anything like a normal life again. But determined to win against all difficulties, Peng exercised hard to make his arms stronger enough to carry out everyday chores like washing his face and brushing his teeth. On finding out his plight to survive, doctors at China Rehabilitation Research Center in Beijing devised a plan to get him up walking again. A sophisticated egg cup-like casing was devised to hold his body with 2 bionic legs attached to it. And in no time, Peng learned walking again and was back to work. He set up his own cut-price supermarket, the Half-Man, Half-Price store. China's Half-Man became an inspiration for others. He started motivating others by giving talks on overcoming disability and encouraging them to never give up. Peng Shulin's story is not just the story of someone overcoming the hardest times of one's life or a medical achievement, but the story of how one can turn the life of adversities into a splendid success story, a feat of endurance, a triumph of the human spirit in overcoming extremes.
Well, this brings us to the end of this edition of World Connect. Do send us your feedback. You can write to us at worldconnect.ddnews@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook. But before we wrap up, we leave you with images of Elvis Presley fans who gathered in Australia to celebrate the birth anniversary of the King of Rock and Roll. Now, fans from around the globe and of all ages and backgrounds thronged the park's town in New South Wales, donning sunglasses and wigs to relive the music and movies of Elvis. That's it in this edition of World Connect. Thanks for watching.
Walking through a party in the county jail. The prison band was there and they began to wail. The band was jumping and the drum began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing. Let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Spider Murphy played his tenor saxophone. Little Joe was blowing on the slide trombone. The drummer boy from Illinois would crash, boom, bang. The whole rhythm section was a purple